Good morning, friends, and welcome to the Wacky Wednesday Roundup. This is a thought experiment that I started last week where I go through a couple of the headlines and put my own Eric spin on things. So, we're going to talk about a couple of things. When I'm going to thankfully be back into the game, as in I'm going to be commuting to work and everything here in a couple of weeks. And back when I was doing that, I would typically listen to NPR Morning Edition, and then on the way home, I would listen to All Things Considered. But I've got some serious bones to pick, and I have for some time. And going to go right to an article written by a gentleman named Yuri Berliner, who resigned back in early April. And he starts with, the stereotype of the NPR listener: EV driving, Wordle playing, tote bag carrying, coastal elite. Okay. So I don't drive an EV. I do enjoy playing me some Wordle, though. In fact, I pay the $40 a year to have access to all the New York Times puzzles. I don't read the New York Times, but they do have some damn good puzzles. I will tell you that. Their beta version uh, game right now, uh, where you basically spell out words in a whole grid, and that's a pretty awesome game. And I also like playing Connections, even though half the time I get beat by Lena Wu's cleverness. I got to meet her. Tell her, hey, you're great. You beat me half the time on that. But other than that, yeah, I don't really carry a tote bag. I use an old laptop case that I repurpose to be my lunch box and everything else. You know, and yes, I am a coastal elite. I did grow up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I went to college at the United States in Annapolis, and I later went to college again to get a master's at Southern Virginia University, which is in Newport, Rhode Island. So, and I now live in the greater Jacksonville area in Florida. Actually, I technically live in St. Augustine now. So, yes, I've been a coastal elite. I've spent my life within 50 miles of the coast for the most part, and I served in the Navy. And so, of course, I'm going to be on the coast, right? Because that's, we don't have ships in the middle of Kansas. I'll just put it that way. Um, I'm Sarah Lawrence educated, was raised by a lesbian peace activist mother. Okay, that was not me. That's Mr. Berliner. He drives a Subaru, and Spotify says his listening habits are most similar to people in Berkeley. I grew up near Berkeley. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what that means. I'm my music taste personally. I like classic rock. I like old rock. I like blues. I'm really a jazz head at heart. And when I do listen to blues, I try to find um, stuff from over a century ago. Things like Gus Cannon and such. So I got that. Um, Woody Guthrie, excellent. If you watch the Grapes of Wrath movie with Henry Fonda, uh, Woody Guthrie actually has a uncredited role where he's playing his guitar and singing in there. Great movie. Doesn't go all the way as far as the book goes, but well, I grew up in the Bay Area, so I'm a Steinbeck fan by nature anyway. So he says, when I got a job here 25 years ago, I never looked back. As a senior editor on the business desk where news is always breaking, we've covered upheavals in the workplace, supermarket prices, social media, and AI. Okay, all right. Well, I do have some relevant recent experience with AI. I was working a part-time remote job with a company up in DC, and I've written and done lots of research, and even sometimes do some freelance work with making AI better, kind of being in the trenches kind of thing. So I got that. Okay. I'm going down to the meat and potatoes. Okay, well, I'm not even going to get down that far. So the basic thing that Mr. Berliner complained about, his gripes, and he wrote this thing on Substack, and then they basically asked him to resign about a day or two after he published this in his Substack. But what it comes down to is the people at NPR, which is half funded by taxpayer dollars, the other half of their money comes from listeners like you. And that's why they do those annoying week-long things every quarter where you get about 10 minutes of wait, don't tell me, and then it goes right into begging for money. The problem with NPR is these people are way too clever for their own good. And to that end, they basically lecture the listener on how to think. So when I really started getting irritated with them was actually about 20 years ago. And that's, where we go into Iraq, we're in Afghanistan, we're fighting these two forever wars, as they later became known. And we're catching people from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, to any other number of terrorists who had things to do, and we put them into this legal limbo by keeping them in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So, or also known as Gitmo. And then at that point, they started lecturing me when I was driving into my teaching job in Newport. I was an instructor at the Surface Warfare Officers School, and that's my background. I am a surface warfare officer, retired now, but that basically means you serve in ships. And I was on my shore duty, so I was teaching young ensigns and lieutenants, junior grade, how to be better surface warfare officers. And eventually, even though I wasn't a department head yet, I was teaching department heads in such things as tactical maneuvering, force protection, anti-terrorism, things like that. And it was fun. It was a blast. I really did have a blast. I was running simulators and challenging people as they were going. In fact, I was even training people who were about to take command of ships. That was pretty fun. But anyway, when I was driving into Newport, it felt like suddenly Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the rest of his minions, they're cooling their heels at Gitmo, we're not terrorists. In fact, they are all loving fathers and poets. We just got it wrong. That's because W was the president, and they're definitely they definitely lean Democrat, to the point that they Juan Williams actually was he had a role in NPR, and he said something conservative enough that they fired him. So there you go. Then so every terrorist is a loving father and poet. Then the narrative during the Obama years was, if I shoot somebody, Castle Doctrine, I live in Florida, and yes, I do pack heat. Some guy, some lowlife breaks into my house and I shoot them. At least here in Florida, generally there's going to be no questions asked. Guy broke in, me and my wife were sleeping, I shoot them. Chances are I'm going to be okay. Try that in California or Massachusetts. They make you the criminal. And by that, I mean, I'm the criminal in their eyes because I I worked my ass off. I spent, 20 years of renting apartments and moving all over the place so I could finally settle down in one location and actually have a house of my own. I mean, how dare I have, property? It's not even like I drive fancy cars. All of my vehicles are used. I don't buy new cars. I bought a new car twice in my life, and that's back when I was younger. And I still have one of those. First car I bought was a 2001 Honda Accord, brand new, 43 miles on the clock. Second time was in 2005. My first wife decided she wanted a Mini Cooper, and I went and I found her a Mini Cooper, bought it with about 10 miles on the clock. I still have that car, almost 20 years old now. And I do need to, the only reason I'm not driving it right now is because I need to replace the body control module because it's doing weird things like windshield wipers randomly turn on. Windows suddenly aren't going up and down like they should. And the radio randomly just stops working. So I got to address that. That's probably about a $300 or $400 job, and then I'll be driving that car again. So I really am, anyhow. Yeah, Coastal Elite. And here's the other things that I'm going to get into it with NPR and what they lectured. So we all probably are trying to forget this little virus that came from China. And so I'm going to talk a little bit from my lens. I was in South Korea when COVID broke, and later I worked in the Pentagon as a China analyst of sorts. Technically my title was political military officer, but I was doing a lot of China analyzing, and my day job of sorts, my primary duty was to be the Mongolia desk officer. So I got to I got to get pretty tight with the defense attaché, Colonel Gonsuk, and yeah, that was fun, fascinating. I knew nothing about Mongolia other than that Genghis Khan, the most successful conqueror of the world, even more so than Alexander the Great. Yeah, Mongolia is a fascinating country. I hope to eventually get to Ulaanbaatar and be able to hang out with some good Mongolian friends. But the other jobs, the other things that were in my portfolio were intellectual theft or intellectual property theft, so IP theft, right? We have all these Chinese people coming into our country, going to our colleges and universities, and our colleges and universities are setting up satellite campuses over, in Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, so forth. And a lot of our intellectual property is just being randomly given away outright, and if not that egregious, it's being stolen and taken back. There's a reason why the analysts typically go, well, okay, China is working on this capability, and by that I mean, as an example, aircraft carriers. Oh yeah, we think they'll get there in about 10, 15 years, and not even 5 years later, they got the capability. How are they getting it so quickly? Fill in the blanks. Go on the State Department website, look at withhold release orders, and you'll start kind of understanding. Human rights thing in Xinjiang, Australian Australia, actually, the ASPI. It's an institute where they focus on human rights issues in Xinjiang, and Xinjiang is known as where the Uyghur people live, and as well as Hui. So these are Turkic ethnic folks, and they are practicing Muslims, and uh, China actually, during their one-child policy, they actually kind of left them alone so they could have more than one child and live, culturally the way that they need to live. Good on them back in the day. Now they put handlers in all their major cities in Xinjiang. They put what they call cadre into people's houses, and they make them do things that are culturally taboo in Islam, such as drinking alcohol. They pressure them to drink alcohol, so they're turning them into alks, right? Because I guess the rest of China likes to drink too. I do have it on good authority that Xi Jinping does like to drink, and he's a chain smoker. So he hasn't dropped dead from lung cancer is amazing. But the same way that Putin has, by all accounts, we in the West believe he's got Parkinson's, and he's still somehow alive. So who knows? Anyhow, when it comes to that COVID, it came from the lab. You've got a big drug lab in Wuhan, and a couple blocks away, you've got a wet market. And there were two theories initially. Either it got leaked out of the lab intentionally or by accident, probably by accident, I would imagine. I mean, if you've watched the 4-part miniseries that Stephen King did back in the 90s, The Stand, big virus comes out accidentally, kills half the world or kills 90% of the world, and you got the 10% who are somehow immune to it, picking up the pieces and trying to, rebuild society. So I suspect that's what happened, that it was an accidental thing. And of course, when you're dealing with authoritarian governments, such as the People's Republic of China, they're going to be kind of embarrassed, and they're going to try to do some damage control. So the other theory was somebody caught it from eating a bat that was undercooked or something like that they got at the wet market. Okay. Quite possible when 20 years ago when the SARS outbreak happened, and that actually was proven to have come from a wet market. That actually could happen. But because we have a guy named Donnie J in the White House, NPR and the rest of the media went straight to the wet market theory, and to the point that if you even mentioned a possible lab leak from the Wuhan lab, you'd get put in Facebook timeout. You'd be put in Facebook jail, if not outright banned permanently. And that's, that's a suppression of speech. And that was even going on when Donnie J was still in the White House. The Jen Psaki's, the Anthony Fauci's, all those people were going behind the scenes and manipulating social media, which should be a bastion or, a place where we can have free speech and say whatever we want. Of course, privately owned organizations, First Amendment doesn't really apply. They can censor the hell out of us for whatever reason. But it just got very suspect. And then, of course, once Biden became president, once Sleepy Joe became the president, then it got even worse. And I don't know how much, I'm a fan of Elon Musk only because of the space program, SpaceX. I live right here, northern Florida, and practically every single day I can go out on my front porch and I can see a SpaceX mission happening. I can see a Falcon 9 flying, and maybe once Boeing, they're not having a very good track record with their airplanes, and apparently that transposes into their spaceship, the Starliner. Because how many times have they tried to launch this thing already, and it's still sitting right there on the launch pad? There we go. But anyway, NPR went hook, line, sinker, went hardcore on the wet market theory, and anybody who even suggested it could have possibly come out of a lab, out of a major biolab 2 blocks away, if even that. Suddenly we were a bunch of, might as well have our red hats on, doing Nazi salutes, and following that Spencer fellow who was famously doing Nazi salutes, but he did it with a charged wine glass, going Hail Victory. Auf Deutsch, Hail Victory is Sieg Heil. Just so you watch any documentaries about Hitler and you watch him do his Nazi salute and he says Sieg Heil, that means Hail Victory. Yeah, I took some German. I don't really know much of it, but I do remember that. Anyhow, so that, and then let's see, in the early 70s when NPR started, I think they started in 1971. They had their 50th anniversary some time ago. And this is in the midst of the NOW movement, National Organization of Women, feminism, basically a coup de grace or an end game of sorts to literally centuries of feminism, going all the way to Joan of Arc, to to Susan B. Anthony, and getting women the right to vote, and then getting women the right to work jobs in the post-war era, and all the way to this day. And now, and some of you are going to hate me for saying this, there are some guys who just aren't cutting it as much as they want in sports. So what are they doing? They are now gender fluid. And they are literally stealing medals, trophies, and accolades from actual women. I used to run track, I guess, if I was, and I wasn't a very good track runner. I was a miler, 2-miler. Those were the events I did, and I could actually compete okay in those events. But anything else, sprinting, long distance, that wasn't in me. Everybody's got their niche that they've fallen to. So let's say I'm not happy, and I'm 18 or I'm 17 and I'm running, low 5-minute mile, and there's women who are actually faster than me at this point. So I don't know if it would have done that great, but maybe I just have an epiphany. I am not really a man. I was assigned as a man at birth. I guess I start wearing women's clothing, and I don't know. I've got size 10.5 feet. I don't know if they even make high heels that'll fit me, and I've never actually tried to wear high heels except, as a small child, like everybody does. You try on mommy's shoes and stuff because you're just being a kid and you're curious about things. Okay. The anyhow, and as for this assigned thing, and NPR pushes this narrative, I was assigned my gender. Really, I didn't know when I was in the womb that I had to get into line, submit a dream sheet of things I want to do in my life, and then I get an assignment. Is that how this works? Because when I hear about assignments, I'm thinking back to my Navy career. Um, at the Naval Academy, we had a dream sheet of things that we wanted to do. Okay, so I want to fly an airplane. I want to drive a ship. I want to go to nuke school and learn how to raise steam by the power of magic rocks, also known as uranium, and so on. We have a dream sheet, things that we want to do. And then there's a talent acquisition management office that goes through everybody's, grades, transcripts, physical things. We get a physical before we get assigned. So I got assigned to be a surface warfare officer, which is great by me because that's kind of what I wanted to do. I was either going to fly planes or I was going to drive ships, and I got to drive ships. So I won. Okay, that's what being assigned to anything means to me, anyhow. And then you got these people here going, well, I was assigned male at birth, but I feel like a female, or I was assigned female, but I feel like a man. That I didn't know that we were applying for who we're going to be before we were born, because I get assigned to that to me anyway, that means I put in a dream sheet. I got selected for something. That's what assignment means in my world, and probably in your world as well, because people who are going to be watching this are professionals. And it went that way when I would come up on orders. So as an officer, our tours were typically 1.5, 2 year tours. So every 1.5 to 2 years, you're moving. Chances are you're moving. Government pays for your move, but you have to up and leave and move somewhere else, hundreds of miles away, and go to your next job because you were assigned that job. You were given orders, not suggestions, orders, right? Anyway, enough on that. And then the defund the police movement. So I grew up in a law enforcement family, and a lot of friends I went to high school and even in college. Guys, I know some guys who left the Navy and went to work for the Secret Service or the FBI. So trust me, I'm all on board with law enforcement. So now, on a side note there, I still get thanked for my service. I was on an air-conditioned ship. I never got shot at. The closest I got to combat was 2011 USS Kearsarge. I was on watch when we launched the initial Harriers strikes on Libya, and I won't talk much more about that because of OPSEC, secrecy, things like that. It was definitely an interesting experience, though. But yes, it all started. I was on the smoke deck having a cig, and now I vape. I don't use cancer sticks anymore, but I was out there having a cancer stick, and on the horizon, I see a bunch of missiles coming from under the sea, as in from submarines. They were Tomahawks. Then, about a minute later, shut down the internet, and the captain comes on the 1MC, which is the intercom on a ship, the general announcing circuit, as we call it, telling us We are now engaged in kinetic operations against the country of Libya. And for a couple months, we were flying the Harriers around the clock, doing trap missions, tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel missions with the Ospreys and CH-53s. It was fun, and I was there in combat, so I was processing all the information. I had a front row seat to history. That's how I like to describe it. Pretty cool. Anyhow, then NPR tried to lecture us, and this is after I had gotten back. I got back in May of 2011. So guess what? 10-year anniversary of 9/11 happens, and NPR, to a fault, pushes that the embassy in Benghazi was attacked and the ambassador killed because somebody made an insensitive video. Now, Ray Charles could have looked at the calendar. He's blind. He could have looked at the calendar and gone, well, it's September 11th, 2011. 10 years ago, some planes crashed into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And there's now an attack. Anyway, Obama was so busy trying to get Susan Rice appointed to be the Secretary of State that he had her running around all the media circuits, if you remember, pushing this narrative that the attack on Benghazi happened because an offensive video was put on YouTube or something, and that really angered a lot of devout Muslims, and so they reacted by attacking. No, September 11th. I'm sitting there. I basically that scene, that popular meme, that GIF meme where Michael Jackson's eating popcorn watching Thriller. Yeah, that's kind of what I did. I just made some popcorn, grabbed a beer, sat down on that weekend, and I'm telling my family, this is a complete farce. But NPR, being good old loyal Democrats they told us what to think, tried to tell us what to think. Apparently there are lower academic standards in many colleges and universities because people were actually with degrees were actually continue just believing this stuff and reciting it without any critical thought. Maybe that's where I came out ahead going to a service academy, as in I went to the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. I was also accepted to the Coast Guard Academy, as was my wife. We both were, and to the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. But she's from Baltimore, so it made sense for her to go to Annapolis. And for me on the West Coast, having never been to either Annapolis or New London, I had my mom flip a coin. That's how I decided. And that's how I literally went to Annapolis. But what you get out of a service academy education is critical thinking. And I could sit here and I can go, okay, I'm hearing this in the media. I'm reading this from this newspaper. What are the hidden messages? What's between the lines? What are they trying to indoctrinate me in? That's what NPR does. So Mr. Berliner was right to call him out, and then they fired him. Because why not? So I think I've beat the dead horse on the NPR thing. Oh, the Israel-Hamas war. Yeah. Personally, I stand with Israel. Eretz Israel, right? Land of Israel. And I do that because I'm a Christian. And as a Christian, we believe in Jews. We really do. to the point that we follow a guy who was a Jewish carpenter for most of his adult life, and his end game was last 2 or 3 years of his life, um, building a following, doing miracles, turning water into wine, raising Lazarus from the dead, all those things. And I do firmly believe that it all happened. And so, and I was also raised Catholic, so you'll often hear people say that they're culturally Jewish, meaning that they're Jewish, they don't go to synagogue or anything like that. Maybe they don't even believe in God, but they're culturally Jewish. I'm a Protestant now, but I'm culturally Catholic, as in I was raised in the faith and have a very Catholic way of looking at things. So I am a cultural Catholic, but I'm a Protestant by where I go to Sunday worship. All right. So anyway, back to the Israel-Hamas war. So yeah, go back centuries. You got the Ottoman Empire. After the war, it's mandatory Palestine, and it's administered by the Brits, while the French are administering what is now Syria, right? So, so the powers have their little slice of the pie. Then Hitler comes to power. Holocaust happens. We fight the Second World War, and in the wake of it, finally, the international community decides, okay, we're going to create Israel, and these are historic homelands for Jews and early Christians. We're going to carve this up. We're going to have Israel. We're going to have Palestine. Two-state solution. Should work, right? Well, almost 80 years later, and it hasn't quite worked. And we're seeing this in what has actually been the longest Arab-Israeli conflict at all. This has been going on since last October. So, and there's no sign or any indications that it's going to stop anytime soon, even though, America being the great solution seeker that we are as a nation. And I say that wholeheartedly. That's one thing I can be proud of being American, is we try to solve the problems. We try to negotiate the peace. And this goes back all the way to at least the Russo-Japanese War in 1904, 1905. We have a tradition of helping other countries get together and forming solutions that sometimes actually lead to long-term windfalls, such as Camp David. For example, Carter brings in Anwar Sadat and Mahatma Begin and puts them together, gets them in the same room, and now Egypt and Israel have not fought a single battle since then. And that was around the time I was born. That was 1979. So, there's things. There's goodness there, but when it comes down, now we got all these college protests, and now we're in June, so most of the college graduation commencement ceremonies are already coming past. But all this protesting at various colleges and universities across the country, and the way NPR tends to portray the pro-Palestinian people as being people of peace. No, they're being people of violence. They misrepresent some of the things that the Palestinian folks have been saying in Arabic. they report that, oh, we just don't want Zionists. And Zionism, that's kind of a loaded term. That goes all the way back to Theodor Herzl back in the 19th century with the Zionist movement, a land for our people kind of thing, the Eretz Israel mindset. That's Zionism. But we've had a state of Israel for almost 80 years now, for 76 years. And they are our biggest strategic ally in that part of the world. We're not letting Israel disappear, and certainly not because a couple thousand guys who are high on amphetamines or khat. Khat is it's a relative of the onion. It's a Schedule 1 narcotic in the United States, but in that part of the world, they will chew these things and it will get them completely amped up and hyper alert and not even thinking straight. So they go into a couple kibbutzim, right? And they kill a bunch of people living their peaceful communal life in said kibbutzim, which would be the plural of a kibbutz, because they attack more than one. And now the NPR narrative, which strikes me as odd because I believe at least half of NPR people are Jewish, and they also have a significant representation of Muslims. And then once you got a conservative Christian guy, such as, Juan Williams, he says something they don't agree with, he's out the door. So much for free speech, huh? Or Mr. Yuri Berliner got asked to resign, meaning he got fired. That's how that works. His 25 years at NPR meant nothing, but he finally called it out. And he is a devout Jew, as I understand, so he's not going to pull any punches, and he's right to do that. So, yeah, back to the whole thing about every terrorist in Gitmo is not a terrorist. They're a loving father and poet. Or if I exercise council doctrine, I'm the criminal somehow, even though I did not have a choice in somebody breaking into my house and potentially killing me and my wife. Or we're supposed to let a guy who looks like Michael Phelps grow his hair out long so he can win trophies in a women's event. And then as soon as actual elite female athletes are saying something about it, they're bigots. They're terrible people. They should join the Ku Klux Klan for all we care. That's the NPR way. And that's also the majority of mainstream media. Now, I'm not a fan of Fox News or Newsmax or any of those far conservative ones because they go way too far in the other direction. And I am not interested in living in a fascist country. I'm not interested in America becoming the Fourth Reich. I'm also not interested in America becoming a Soylent Green, Fahrenheit 451 kind of place. But I feel like, well, Bradbury, the great author, but Fahrenheit 451, if you haven't read the book, read the book, or at least watch the movie. Government tells us what to think, and they ban books, and they only allow us to read certain books. Sounds like a religious cult. Sounds like some of what we're seeing in more conservative parts of the country. And I live in Florida, so I'm a Southerner by location. And we are fighting these battles about banning books. And I don't agree with it either. When I was getting ready to leave the military, I really, my dream job would be to be a teacher or a librarian. But in this political climate, I don't think I would keep my sanity doing either or both professions. So, I'm I'm a Renaissance man. I'm an Enlightenment scholar. I believe in access to information, information that might be controversial, information that might offend people, but information, knowledge is power, and the way things have been going lately, we're being indoctrinated from both ends, being told what to think. If you're a MAGA hat wearing guy, you're you're being told what to think. If you're a liberal, you're being told what to think. And independent people like me, I'm actually registered as a libertarian, and I even brought my wife over from the GOP. She was hardcore Republican, but I convinced her why being a libertarian is where we need to go. Look it up. Anyway, I've kind of rambled on with my Wacky Wednesday news roundup about why NPR sucks, and that's it. That's all I have to say. Have a great day. Love you guys, and bye now.